So we haven't really given this like a name because we don't know if it's going to be an ongoing thing. I think conversations between Christians is needed for, what some would say political conversations, social issues that's going on, things you see on the news, you know, anything and everything that has something to do with the way people are treated in reality and how we should address it as Christians. And so, whether or not we have more conversations like this, I would like to. But, I guess it'd just be if something pops up, people need to talk about it. I feel like this would be a cool platform to be able to do that. And right now we're inviting people from the official Trackstarz Universe group because we know the folks in there are, they believe what Trackstarz is doing. I'm pretty sure everybody in there is a believer. If not, that's kind of cool. But honestly, specifically for me, an atheist point of view on it isn't as frustrating to me as it would be if believers couldn't agree on it. And so that's why another reason why I was thinking official universe group. And it's a cool extra perk that people can participate and join in these conversations because I do believe we have a diverse group of individuals in the official Trackstarz universe, which is good. It's good. People from different walks of life, and so we view things differently. But I was texting Derek and was saying we should have a conversation about this somehow, and that's when we invited people from the official universe. A few people responded, but obviously people are limited to time, work, things like that. So hopefully this will be the first of many conversations. But so we have Mr. Derek Myers Jr. with I'm not going to say with the Trayvon Martin hoodie because I feel like that'd be terrible.
What a way to start
off. I'm sorry. I'm trying to lighten the mood here. I'm trying to lighten the mood. No pun intended to my skin tone. Then we got David Atkinson. So welcome everybody. I'm Jason Bordeaux. So anyway, I guess I'll just start with kind of the initial startup of the conversation. A few weeks ago, I was at work. I was listening to Lauryn Hill, the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, for the very first time. And
wow.
It was the very first time listening to the full thing. I've heard a couple songs off of it, but
okay.
But because everybody always references that as being one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time, and not just from women, just in general. And like Lecrae, he said it changed the way he viewed hip hop and the way he addressed his music and things like that. I thought it was important to check it out. So I did, and I was like, I was learning things, from this woman. And so I posted a screenshot of one of the songs. I posted on my Instagram, which in turn posted on my Facebook. And I said, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I know I said something to the effect of, I think us white men need to listen to black women because there's a lot that we can learn from them. And the reason why I said that, and I just want to explain that, is because I felt like those are like two opposite ends of the spectrum. Man, woman, black, white. And so I was, in general, we can learn from anybody who is different from us. So for me, it was more in terms of not like us white people are always wrong, black women are always right. We need to listen to them because they're going to correct us on everything that we're wrong about. It wasn't necessarily that. It was just, people who are different from us, from all different sex, gender, races, we can learn from each other. And then a conversation got started in my comments section, and some people weighed in, and then white privilege got mentioned. White privilege got carried on over into the Trackstarz Universe group, and so I felt like it'd be a good conversation to have. It's been talked about on the Trackstarz podcast. It's been talked about in many different platforms, but I felt like this is a way for everybody else to kind of be able to weigh in on it. And so we did open it up. You two gentlemen are the only ones who've been able to make it, aside from me. But, so the question is, I think especially for white people, is white privilege real? And so, and to define that, or to think about that, we need to know what white privilege is. What's the definition of it? Because you kind of have to start with the definition. And so, I don't know who
So
wants to jump in on that first.
let me ask you this. As a white man, what do you think white privilege actually is? Before you found out what it was, what did you think it was?
So when I first heard it, I heard about it through social media, and Lavoisier Cornerstone is actually the one that broke it down for me on one of his Periscope sessions. And so, what
Mhm.
I thought it was when I initially heard it was that white people are can only be or only successful based on their skin tone. And so
Okay.
it's like, white people have an unfair advantage to to anybody else who wasn't white. And
Right.
so what that made me feel when I heard that was, hold on, wait, so you're telling me I'm only reaching certain plateau or I'm only reaching certain limits or certain levels of, quote, success based on my skin tone, that
Hmm.
if I was a black man, that I wouldn't be able to reach this level. So that's what it felt like initially. And
Okay.
and after conversations with people, I realized that's not what that's not the full definition of it.
Right. Um, I think to me it's interesting to find out that white people, not all white people, but the majority of white people that I've spoken to or been in um, conversations with, group conversations with about white privilege are actually offended by it. Um, Basically, the definition of white privilege is just it's more so of a systemic um, how should I put it? It's more of a systemic element in America where white people have it a lot easier. It's a privilege um, in a sense of they're easy. How should I put it? They have it a lot easier in certain aspects than people of color,
Okay.
and it's not the sense of um, like they're just not they don't earn what they work for or anything like that. But let's just say it's more so just a systemic thing in America where white people just have it a lot easier. The definition I found earlier though is that it's more so just a term of societal privileges that benefit people identified as white in some countries beyond what is commonly experienced by non-white people under the same social, political, or economic circumstances. So, just simply put, like Jason, you and I could go through the same situation. You get pulled over by a cop, right? You're likely to not be harassed by that cop. David and I, as black men, have a better chance of being harassed. Um, Jobs, white people have a lot easier time getting jobs um, with the same situation as a person of color. Like you might not. You actually gave an example of something like that on a group, right, Jason?
For me, kind of, yeah, kind of, sort of. So I went to a job interview for a custodian job at a local hospital, and I was the only white candidate there. Everybody else was black. There was a older black man who was in military. He was in suit and tie, like decked out. Everybody knew just the way he was dressed that he had the job. like um,
Right.
everybody else, like I went in with a polo T-shirt and like a polo shirt, like I'd wear on like a Sunday because I don't wear a suit and tie, and some khaki shorts. And like the other guys, there was one black guy. He had on some blue jeans, but most everybody else had like suit pants and at least a button-up shirt.
Hmm.
And there were different things. There was one guy who was high, and you could tell he was high. He smelled like weed. So you knew he wasn't going to get the job. But there were, and I'm just trying to be completely honest I mean, but there was probably 8 of us, and
Mm-hmm.
so the other 5 individuals who were there, they were all dressed a lot better than I was. Now, obviously, we each had individual interviews, with the hiring staff, one on one. Then we had a group interview, but in the group interview, the director said, "Now I know some of y'all probably dress for the job, but never go to an interview with shorts or a polo T-shirt." And obviously, she's talking about me because I was the only one dressed like that.
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up getting the job. It was me and then the older black gentleman who was dressed very, very, very sharply.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, I was thinking, like, I mean, not at that time. At that time, I was just grateful I got the job because I needed a job. And but thinking back, I was like, I wonder if maybe, and even though all of the hiring staff were all black people, like
Mm-hmm.
I've actually heard older black people talk about hiring younger or hiring white people over black people because they were afraid, there might be issues or whatever. And so I've actually heard that come from people in power who are white and black.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a landlord one time before I got this job. I had lost my job. I was jobless, drawing unemployment. I was drawing $124 a week, so that's like $500 a month. And my wife and I were trying to find a place to rent, and so we go to found a place in the paper. We went and we saw the place, and we told the guy, I was like, well, I currently don't have a job, but I'm looking work. He saw unemployment was 124 a week. The rent was $400, so that's an extra, $100 for everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
this was at the time where the economy was bad. Like,
Okay.
so it wasn't even a good time period. It was like 2009, I think. 2009? Was it 2000? It
Yeah,
might be
2008,
2008.
2009.
2008,
I
2009, where it
graduated
wasn't.
college.
Yeah, it wasn't like jobs were way out there, and
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have a job. And I had asked him at one point. I was like, "What kind of area is this? Is it quiet or whatever?" His response to me was, "Well, yeah, I don't rent to black people." That was his response. And initially, I was thinking,
That
I
brings up
was,
something about the talk. Okay,
I
yeah,
was
go ahead.
like, I was like, part of me was like, I don't even know if I want to rent you. That was a very racist answer. And
Yeah.
but like, I needed a place to live, and he let me rent it. And and I was thinking back, after I heard about white privilege, I was thinking, one, if I was a black guy, as soon as he saw me, immediately I wouldn't have got the place. And somebody
Mm-hmm.
said, somebody in the group said, well, maybe he's just being racist. Maybe that's just a racist thing, not a white privilege thing. But I'm thinking if it was anybody else, they probably would have looked at me and said, well, he's got a better chance of getting a job being a young white guy than maybe a young black guy. Now,
Mm-hmm.
anything that we say, and I'll say this, I should have said at the beginning, I'm not speaking for all white people. Derek, David, you aren't speaking for all black people. We're not saying that everybody who looks like us has the same opinion, the same experiences. Everybody has a different life. But
Right.
I mean, kind of going back to the initial question when you asked me about white privilege, like I grew up in a very poor neighborhood. My parents were both deaf mute. They couldn't get jobs because of their situation. They didn't have hearing privilege, and
Mm-hmm.
so like my mom was in the situation one time. She was working for a place, and she's only any job she's ever had was cleaning. That's the only job she's ever had. And that's because you don't really have to have people interaction. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a situation where she was taken advantage of. There were two ladies there who stole money and said she did it, and she
Mm.
Oh.
ended up getting fired. And
What?
she had no idea what she was getting fired for. They just told her she was fired. And I was young. I was probably like 6 or 7 at the time, but I remember hearing about it later on. And so I grew up poor, walking to soup kitchens like 10 miles away, and so, but thinking back to that and understanding that white privilege doesn't mean that white people have it better than black people in all the time. Because I had several
Yeah.
black friends who had a lot more money than I had.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Interesting enough, though, is a few of those black friends didn't have a father in the house. They just had a mother who,
Mm-hmm.
and they just lived. they had a better living situation than I had. But understanding too that that's not, white privilege. You're kind of going what you're saying is white privilege doesn't mean that white people have a better standards of living than all black people.
Right. And I think the important thing that needs to be understood is that I think pretty much everyone has privilege. It's just a matter of knowing what it is
Sound
and
like Charlemagne the
using
God.
it.
Black privilege.
I actually do want to hear what black privilege is about because I haven't read it.
It's a good book. It's a good book. It's a real easy read too.
So
It's
what's the
real
gist
good.
of that? Because I know a lot of people are going to say, because I have heard people say, well, black people have privilege. They have, black universities and black colleges that, help them specifically and things like that. So just to kind of,
And see, the black universities and stuff like that, if we're gonna really talk about that, black universities were only spawned because blacks were not accepted in white universities.
Right.
So I think my I think people need to realize, like I was saying earlier, that everyone has their own privilege, right? Like you can look at in the job market and you see that men have privilege, right? You see there are other examples of privilege. My whole thing about it is that we should not take it as offense, right? It should be something that you acknowledge and say, okay, how can I help those that are not able to experience what I can experience, right? Like, let's go back to male privilege. Male privilege, we should, as men, um, look at the job market and say, oh, yeah, women are being paid less than men are. What can we do to be able to progress and make that something that's not happening, right? Where women can actually be paid equally in the job market for the equal work, for skills and for work, right? So
well, let's just
when
add in
we're
their
talking about,
experience. Because
I'm sorry.
a lot of argument comes from, well, a lot of these white men have more experience, or a lot of these men have more experience, and so I would add in their equal experience skill. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all about what you can bring to the table, in my opinion. I think if you're able to bring a certain amount of skills and determination and dedication to the table, then you should be getting paid as just same as anyone else. Um, so when we talk about white privilege, I think the main reason why a lot of white people um, take offense to it is because they believe that we're saying, oh, you only got this because of white privilege, or you're only successful because of white privilege. In a sense, you could say that, but it's not that in the whole in the whole thing. You have to break it down and say, yeah, so your white privilege stems from um the system that's built in this country. So what can we do to make sure that the things that white people enjoy, like you know, uh, let's
Things that white people enjoy.
um not getting shot by cops, but for a speeding ticket, not being harassed by cops, or being able to get a job, even without certain qualifications, or not being turned away from even an interview because of your name, stuff like that. Let's actually figure out what we can do to help people of color, like for equality. Like it's not a bad thing. Use your white privilege to help bring attention to what's going on. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's not something that I think white people should take offense to. I think they take offense to it because they think it's that we're looking at it as um, that's the only way you're able to achieve. And that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that that's why you're able to achieve, but you are afforded certain things because of that. And so that would be the same thing as male privilege in the workplace. You know, as men are afforded more money, a better pay than women because of being a man. You know, so it's something that I think we should actually be able to sit down and talk about and not be um, arguing about. You know, because when we're arguing about stuff like that, now we're not listening to either side. And I mean, come on, look at the history of the country. That male privilege and white privilege has always been something that's been dominant in our history. You know, so I think we have to figure out if we're going to move forward and be better and do better, we have to figure out what's been the cause of that and actually change some things.
Yeah,
Um, so go ahead.
and I think with like one on ramp with male privilege is like I worked in like construction management, but I had the opportunity to go to Saudi to work in Saudi, and Saudi is extreme version of male privilege. Like, own the office was 100% male,
Hmm.
so the female coworkers didn't even have the opportunity to go there to work. So they worked it out with some of the projects in Saudi. Women from outside could work, but generally no. So it's like I think people use privilege to. And it didn't mean that working in Saudi was easy. It was still difficult, but
Hmm.
but and also there's different men had all different levels of jobs there too. But I think people use the word privilege to not actually the whole point of it is to not be offensive, to not say you're racist, but to say you're born into a country that has certain norms that favor you in some ways. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
I
And just
think the
have
point of
to
it
just
is
acknowledge it.
but I think the reason one of the reasons why it's difficult not to acknowledge is because my guess is most white people didn't hear about white privilege from white people. It seemed my guess is it goes against maybe similar to male privilege.
Hmm.
Maybe we learn about it later on in life and we kind of feel like, why didn't anyone tell me until now?
Well, and I
I
would
mean,
say,
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say part of the reason why I feel like is social media. You know, people can go viral without having top executives having to put them on ABC, NBC, TBS, Fox, and so
Mm-hmm.
like there's less power for those people in power who are predominantly white males to
Mm-hmm.
have people to be able to speak out against this stuff. So now you got social media, you got YouTube, you got Facebook, you got all these different avenues for people to share what's going on, at least in their personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And so now people are like, well, why haven't I ever heard of this until now? And it's like,
Right.
because we didn't have open source information from other individuals living everyday life. And so I think
Yeah,
that's
and
another aspect of it.
yeah, definitely.
ca-
And I think open source information definitely help is huge. And I think just kind of the legacy of segregated churches and laws that like the whole I don't rent to black people or like I was looking at this one book someone Richard Rothstein anyway he talked about like he did this whole book and doing some interviews on like how like through the law not just practice but through laws there were segregated housing and this and that and segregated churches so it's kind of like we set up or some powerful white people not all white people but some mainly powerful white people and men set things up in a certain way and segregated people and put these people down because of race and then people set society up a certain way and I think that's one of the original reasons why we're not really seeing the other side but then like you're saying Jason the open communication with media kind of in some ways breaks through that and so you people have to deal with the whole that like the just seeing something that their bubbles didn't teach them.
Right, right.
could could we maybe put it in perspective of what privilege really means in that whole definition of white privilege, it's mainly just saying advantage.
Well, see,
Maybe we
in the business world, like the thing, and I learned this from number one dude in business, Gary Vaynerchuk.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, he said that, I mean, and just in general, like it's taught, like you people have unfair advantages.
yeah,
Like, and that's just the way it works in the business world. But in the business world, like, people don't get offended by saying, "Well, I'm more successful because I was better programmed to understand technology."
right,
And you know what I'm
right,
saying? Like, Mark Zuckerberg, he had an unfair advantage. The he had the gifts and talents that I would say God gave him to be able to work technology.
right,
And what he does with that is up to him.
Hmm.
right,
Um, and so he can use it to be a hacker. He can use it to build a platform to help people. I think we all have unfair advantages, and honestly, like if you were to use the term unfair advantage, I think it wouldn't be as big of a deal as if you said privilege. Uh,
yeah. I think we need to change the verbiage and say advantage because the 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 conversation can't even get started because it's like what you were saying earlier is like, well, how can this be a privilege if I go through this, that, and the other? If I, if I'm financially, strapped as well, or this, that, and the other. It's not looking at it as, um, you're only, like I said earlier, it's not looking at it as if you're only achieving this, that, and the other because you're white. Um, but it's just saying that that's your advantage. That's your advantage. We have an advantage as being men, and that helps us in the workplace. And I think we have to just acknowledge that and move forward. And how do you use that advantage to help others? That's what I think that the conversation really needs to go. That's the direction that needs to go because some things are not going to change without help from another group.
right.
So we can look at things with social issues and stuff like that. Black people or people of color in general are just not going to be able to change things without white people helping along. It's just not going to happen. um, so I think we have to look at it from that perspective and be able to move forward like that because we're not going to be able to get anything done bickering over
Right,
terminology
right.
you
Now,
know
a question I want to bring up, and this is a question that whenever I heard uh, Captain OG Bossier talking about this on Periscope, I asked him on Periscope. I said, how do white people fight white privilege?" Because, and I mean on a practical level, like conversations are great. Like you got to
hmm
have conversations to get the understanding of what things are. But the actual practical everyday living, how does a white person, how does a male actually fight against it? Because usually, whenever we think about white privilege, we think about or privilege in general. I'm just going to. I think we need to stop saying white privilege, just say privilege, because in general, like there's different privileges, and
yeah,
and I don't want this to be just a racial thing, but it's also a gender thing as well. And
yeah. I don't think you should fight it. I don't. Well, I think what you might be talking about more so fighting is white supremacy and that whole thing, not white privilege.
right,
Because, white privilege, like I said, that's a tool basically. You need to figure out people need to figure out how to use it and help others. It's an advantage and it's a tool. Yeah, and I think if we look at it as like that as a tool instead of as condemnation, um, it might be something that people can start to break down and digest a little bit better. But like I said, I think you're more so talking about white supremacy.
okay. And I think that's the way. I mean, and I mean, like I said, I'm not speaking amongst all, for all white people. But obviously,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I think that's what it would always get twisted in my mind. Is it felt like almost a racial thing, like it was like saying white privilege is equal to white supremacy.
Right.
And some people might have that mindset. I feel like I probably did have a lot of that mindset. So you're pretty
Mm-hmm.
much saying like privilege, being male, being white, being whatever, You're saying that's
Hmm.
like having an extremely valuable skill that other people don't have that you can use to help other people.
Use it to your advantage. Use it. Use it. Don't fight it. Use it.
I
So
kind of agree.
And I think the fact that white people get white privilege and white supremacy mixed up together, that's where the confusion happens. White supremacy is more so that white people, the belief that white people are just superior to all other races, and that belief, that mindset, that perspective is totally different than white privilege.
right.
I don't want you to get rid of your white privilege.
I kind of
I
agree.
don't
Kind of
want
disagree
you to
though.
Okay, go
I
ahead,
kind of
David.
agree. Kind of
use it,
disagree.
bro. Use
But
it.
I think like privileges, kind of like what you were saying before, Jason. People have different skill sets and privileges and this and that. But I think that white privilege is kind of an on ramp to discuss white supremacy because, at least in America, because when you start asking questions, why does someone have a white privilege, or when a man starts asking questions, why do I have no privilege? Then you have to get to white supremacy and things like that. So I see it as different than having a skill set like a Zuckerberg with technology or a painter or whatever. It's like I think like people it's difficult, but like a humility for anyone who has privilege. It's humility, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and just humbly accepting like our history, like as far as
It's
whiteness at least,
acknowledging it.
yeah, and like in America, not just the privilege, but how we got it, how white people got it. Like they people
Hmm.
made a legal category as a white race and made it legally privileged over other races, not just socially, people being mean to each other, but like legally.
Hmm.
And then that spilled over into attitudes and norms, and it got into law, other laws, and it got into norms. And so it's like once you acknowledge the white privilege, no one should feel bad that they have it. But I think people should go on from there and understand why they have it. And the reason why they have it is because of people implementing racism and affecting the U.S. So I think people should not feel bad that they have it, but should use it to kind of undo it. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I think that might be another reason as to why people don't really want to talk about it is because they don't want to acknowledge the history of how they got it.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not
Um,
random.
yeah, because it's something that it's listen, our history in this country is not pretty. Like I think if we stop trying to sugarcoat things and paint it as rainbows and unicorns, like it's some pretty thing, if we actually confront it and say, "Oh yeah, this is how this, that, and the other began," then we can actually move forward in a better way. Because just trying to sweep it under the rug and all that stuff is not going to work. That's that. Not acknowledging your privilege does not help anyone. Honestly, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the other person that you're not trying to offend or whatever. It's not going to help. You might as well use your privilege and use it for good. It's like a superpower. Think about it like that. It's like it's honestly it's like learning
My
how.
superpower is I'm a white male.
it's it's like when you watch Spider-Man figuring out how to hone his powers as far as the spidey senses or even control his webbing or anything like that. It's just figuring out how to use it to help. Yeah, but using it figuring out how to use it. That's all. Your white privilege is a superpower. Think of it like that. Figure out how to hone it and work it. That's all. That's all. It's not a condemnation. It's not a bad thing. We all have privileges. Women have privileges. Like women can get away with things that men can't get away with. There's certain things we just have to figure out what it is and acknowledge it and move forward.
From what I understand, Jason, this is a summary of Charlemagne's book.
It's actually
right?
not.
No, I didn't
I'm
read
just
it actually.
thinking. You know what? Now,
I heard
it
talk
may
about it a
actually.
bit.
I gotta read it again. 'Cause I read it when it
I
first came
heard
out.
talk about it as brilliant idiots. I think that would be interesting if they did a superhero comic where maybe it wasn't a white male because that'd be too obvious, but you have a superhero who works himself out of having superpowers.
It's something
Uh,
there. It's something there.
Logan.
Logan?
Logan. In one of his movies, he tried to get rid of his power to regenerate so he could die.
Oh yeah. Oh
So,
yeah.
kind of, sort of,
That,
in a way.
Yeah,
But.
that's it kind of, yeah.
that had to be the worst Wolverine movie.
Really?
That was trash.
All the Marvel and DC movies that people hate,
That
I
was
didn't have that much of a problem with. Like, I liked Batman versus Superman, but everyone hated it.
That might have to be a different conversation, yo.
Yeah.
Because we can go way over there. I got a feeling this could be a 3-hour conversation on comic book movies. I will say one thing though is I do feel like we have a lot of issues in this country that's going to take a long time to just figure out how to fix. But I will say though I am glad we are in a country where we can talk about this and not necessarily be censored, because a lot of times I feel like this there's some groups of people who bash America as a whole, and I feel like there's some white people that's like, well, we're not a terrible country. We can address these things openly in public and on the web, on TV, because there are countries like China where you can't speak about anything. Cuba, you can't talk about things without the government giving you these things and these standards and categories, because they will shut you down.
We're moving right there.
Now I knew you were ready to say that. There, so currently
Not
we
exactly.
can
We're going right there.
we can talk about these things. Like, we can make this video, we can put it online. So I am grateful that we have the freedom to be able to bring these things up. And
Yeah.
so I will say I'm very and honestly I'd say that's American privilege. To even be able to discuss these issues is an American privilege.
And I lived overseas
Yeah.
in Saudi, and I saw people. Well, I don't want to tell them, but nameless people who were just in the car, and they had something negative to say about like King or whatever. But so they whispered it. I'm like, guys, you're in the car. No one can hear you.
Yeah, yeah, you're looking at it from the American perspective.
They were speaking out. They were speaking out against who?
Someone that it's maybe you shouldn't say anything against in public or whatever.
One of the leaders.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to give anybody away about anything, but
I got you.
I mean, and it was like a reflex to not say it out loud.
Right.
So it's
even though they're in the car.
So Eminem can make a like home song about Trump here.
Yeah.
But if he was over there, he would have got executed. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's no Chinese Eminem. You can't do that over
there. That's the reason why.
Well, Google. Google had an issue where like Google had a moral debate on whether this is something I learned in my ethics class. Like Google had to figure out whether or not they were going to create a Chinese database.
Oh yeah.
That people in China could use, because they don't have free information to everything that we have. And so that was a whole issue. But anyway, that's different topic. That'd be a great another discussion, comparing U.S. to other countries and freedoms and all that stuff. But going by this, though, I did want to say I'm glad we can talk about this in an open format. But yeah, so
can I say one thing?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Real quick to the last question you had. I'll try to make it real quick, because I think you talked about what can people do, but I only said humbling and learning with the past. But I think it's partnering with people, getting in conversation with people, building relationships with people who are different to kind of get the personal touch, but also trying to look at whatever system, group, church, denomination, city you're at, and try to see where there is still racism in those structures and seeing what you can do about that. So anyway, that's real quick. But then you go back.
Isn't one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation was to discuss I guess white privilege in the church?
Yeah, that is another issue to talk about, and
Yeah.
I think I mean, how would you say white privilege exists in the church?
Whew.
There's one like
I,
it's Presbyterian. Oh, go ahead. You can.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
There's one I saw. I'm not sure how I saw it. Something on YouTube, but I think it was through Jamar Tisby. But there's something that the Presbyterian Church did, which is one of the worst churches for whites. um, the PCA. There was someone, I think his name is Sean Lucas. He did this talk on YouTube. He's like a Presbyterian PCA pastor in like in Missouri, but like I think in Missouri, but he like did this whole seminar about how even though the Presbyterian Church started to kind of combat, to kind of keep the gospel and stuff like that, they're also pretty racist. And he actually just did this whole seminar where he just recounted where they sided with racism here, they sided with segregationism there. They tried to discipline people who spoke out against it. They He just kind of went through their history. He was like, here's where he failed, here's where he failed, here's where he failed, here's where because of the gospel we can make up for it. And he talked about working with people. I think it's like for community development and um, just other, I guess, just pursuing relationships and with other Black Christians and starting Christian groups on the different college campuses. But yeah, I think I really liked it. And it was like it's kind of funny because he's not like hip hop at all or quote unquote stereotypically black at all. Like 0%. Like 0.0%. But it was probably one of the best things I've heard from a white person because it was kind of like, here's our history. Yes, we held on to the gospel, but we also failed here, 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 here.
Right.
And I've talked about it with like even like things like Presbyterians had like this doctrine like the spirituality of the church, which I think that they use to like basically say this is why we don't have to deal with social issues or whatever, to basically repent for sin against black people. But he's kind of like, yeah, but no, we have to deal with individual and systemic stuff. So yeah, I mean, but different denominations are different. Some denominations were against it. I think Wesley was against slavery earlier for white Christians and others. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that'd be real interesting to see what denominations fought against slavery. But I mean, I don't know how often denominations change or what the whole. I'm sure different denominations have grown, hopefully, from back in the day. But it'd be interesting to see. I think that'd be a really interesting study. I'm sure somebody out there watching this probably knows. If you do, and we get this on YouTube, leave that in the comments. What denominations back in the day were okay with slavery, and what denominations really fought against it? Because that'd be interesting to see. And I'd love to get some feedback on that. But are there any other? So you said that's Presbyterian.
That was the PCA. I think it was Southern Presbyterian Church or like PCUS, whatever, something like that. And then it became modern day PCA.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Were there any other ways you wanted to address, Derek?
I'm interested in knowing, I guess, how white privilege or even white supremacy affect the church.
I mean, I'll say this. I know, and I mean, it could be a cultural thing. Obviously, you got some pastors, and black and white pastors who feel like hip hop in general is of the devil. It's not a Christian thing at all. Can't be a Christian thing at all. And but like I say, they drive Cadillacs, and pimps are known to drive Cadillacs, so they shouldn't drive Cadillacs, right? I mean, I feel like that's an equal argument. They want to drive Lincolns and Cadillacs. We can listen to hip hop. So
Hey,
There you go.
even if they're not gonna drive, I'm still listening to hip hop, so I don't care.
But
Unless we all drive.
I think it's interesting because I heard Show Baraka was talking. I can't remember who he was talking to. It was a conversation he was having with somebody on YouTube, but he was saying he had like this group of white pastors from a huge church right around the corner from him that was asking him, how do we reach out to the black community, and how do we, do outreach to get more black people into our church or get more black congregants because we're predominantly white. And one of the questions he had was, well, do you have any black people in leadership? And they were like, well, no. He said, that's your first problem. You can't, you don't, I mean, you have no idea what's going on in the black community because you have all white people in your leadership team. And so I thought it was interesting. But another weird thing for me is, and this isn't really addressing white privilege in the church, but just kind of a racial thing, is it's interesting to me whenever you have like predominantly white churches that feel like they need to reach out to black people because they're a lost people. To me, that's a very, I don't know, it's hard for me to figure out stereotypical and racism, uh, but I guess that would fall along stereotyping black people as a whole as a lost people that need to come to whatever, reach with the gospel. And but I have like I thought about that and I was like, man, that's just like I hope I never get to a point where I'm like, you know, hey guys, how do we reach a certain group of people? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um.
agree. Yeah, like you keep saying, it's because we just are so disconnected from them. That's why we say it. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Well, I mean, I feel like I don't know if it's more concern of, hey, how do we want to become a multicultural church? We want to have people from other cultures coming into our church so we can be more integrated, or if it's a, you know, these black people in this neighborhood need to be fixed, so we need to figure out how to
Hmm.
reach them and how to relate to them. And
Well,
so,
we as a church, we do that with other groups too. It's not even a race thing. It could be even the LGBTQ community. For example, um, we as a church do that too.
that's true.
Um, how can we reach the gays and this that, and the other, or even if they come to church now, they're condemned because this that, and the other. I don't know. I think the church in general needs a overhaul. I think we need to do some work
In a new
because
reformation.
something something needs to happen because I think we're out of touch with a lot of stuff, and I think the idea that we're going to be able to go out and get, or help others in general with this type of mindset is laughable. I think we have to actually look in the mirror and figure out what it is we need to actually work on, because we're not going to do anything effectively um, um, with that kind of mindset. So
Right.
I personally, even when we're talking about the church, I think we have to look at all things, whether it's race, um, or sexual orientation, or whatever it might be. We have to look at all those things and figure out how we're addressing all those things properly, because we're actually doing more damage to the message that we're trying to send, um, in how we're approaching sending that message. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
is something we got to actually figure out how to do, and change some things, change your approach, because we're not being as effective as we think we are with reaching the world, because they're looking at us laughing.
Yeah, and I think part of that is just talking about, and probably more specific, the LGBTQ community is, telling them before you ever reach them, before you ever tell them about the gospel, is you're wrong. You need to be doing right, and this is the definition of right. And before you ever give them anything about Christ, about Jesus, and I think a lot of times whenever we view something as wrong, we try to fix it. Now, whether our view of wrong and right is correct, and I'm not trying to make a commentary on that right now. In general, though, when we see people's lifestyle, whether it's alcoholism, porn addiction, gay, being prideful and arrogant, whatever it is.
Mm.
It's never effective to tell them all their faults and then say, you need to come to this loving Christ after I just slammed you for all of your faults.
And you know what? I think one of the main things that we're actually getting wrong, like I said, is our approach. But we're not approaching it like Jesus did. Jesus actually approached others in love and displayed love first before trying to, you know, go forward with the message. And I think that's something we need to do because we're not doing that. Like you said, it's trying to fix the person first and then uh, um, preach to them and tell them, what it is we need to tell them. I think if we're pointing out faults from the beginning, nobody's gonna listen. Like, for example, if I had a porn addiction and you're trying to help me with my porn addiction, are you is do you think that you coming to me condemning me, oh, you're on Pornhub, this, that, and the other, you're doing this, you're watching this, that, and the other, you think that's going to actually help me want to change?
Right, right.
No. And I'm not addicted to porn, by the way, but as an example, that's how we have to look at it. We're not doing it the right way. We're not doing it the right way, and we have to. If we're not honest with ourselves, and we're going to continue doing the way we're doing it right now, it's not effective.
Right.
It's not effective, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're starting to see a lot of millennials pull away from the church because it's speaking as one of the people from that generation, it's fake. It's fake. It seems fake. It looks fake, and I don't want any part of fake. I want if I'm going to do this, I want to do it the right way, and I'm going to go out and talk to others and reach them in the right way, and that's first step is through love. You're not going to agree with everything that someone does, says, or how they live, whatever, but to show love is the first step in reaching out. So I think going back to what we're talking about, I don't know all this stuff about white supremacy or privilege or whatever you want to talk about in the church, but if race is um, the primary thing we're talking about as far as bringing other races into church, that's not gonna work. That's not it's trying to figure out a strategy on how to bring more blacks into a white church or how to bring more whites into a black church or more Hispanics or Asians. That's getting that strategy isn't going to work because if you're not doing it out of love, you're not going to bring anybody there.
Right.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say for me specifically, and and y'all can correct me if I'm in the wrong mindset. Please do. Um, Whenever I see, like, when I'm at work, like I'm walking around making deliveries or whatever. I'm a pharmacy tech in a hospital, so I walk around the hospital, and like I don't know if it's just because of the way, like when I was younger, I actually had I had a bit of racism in me, but it was for two reasons. One, because the very first experiences I had with racism were against me as being a white person. Because I was the only white kid on my bus. I was in a restaurant one time. A couple black kids came in, and I was using the bathroom. And when I came out of the Derek, I think I told you this before. You heard about this, but I came out of the bathroom stall, and like one of them shoved me and was like, "You prejudiced, ain't you?" And I was like, "No." They were like, "Do you even know what that means?" I was like, "Yeah, you." And then like a couple of the boys threw punches at me, and then they left. And then later on, and I never felt like any type of racism at that time, but like growing up, like I mean, just to be honest, like my grandfather had a lot of racism in him. He was racist, and so things that he would say to me kind of fed into that narrative that I was receiving. Some other things, other people would influence me in school and stuff, and I was always on I always had an internal fight about racism because I had a lot of black friends growing up. Then I would have situations where, you know, moved up to high school, and then other white people around me were a lot of them were racist. Um, and so there was always like this weird internal conflict that I always had. And so like even today, like if I see a black person or a black individual in public, like I I'm more likely to talk to them, to be like to say, hey, how you doing? How's your night going? Like in the elevator or something, than it would a typical white person because I don't like I feel like everybody might see me as racist as a white person. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm trying to actively let people know, hey, I'm not racist because I'm white. But
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know why I feel that way. Like honestly have no idea.
Yeah, I don't think you have to look at it that way because honestly, I don't. The first thought that goes through my mind when I see a white person is not racist.
Right, right.
You know, I just see the person, and my experience with that person will let me know, oh, whether you're a racist or an idiot.
Right.
You know, um, let me ask you a question though, because you were talking about your experiences growing up. Um, would you define what you experienced as racism or discrimination?
Uh you mean what, like against me?
Yeah, against you, because looking at the definition of racism versus the definition of discrimination, um, racism racism's definition is to believe that your race is superior to another race. You know, um, and that's what the system in America has is founded on, right? Discrimination is being picked on because of either how you look or what you are. So the way I've always viewed it is that, and you might, we can discuss this if you want. Um, because of our history in America, racists can only be white, right? And anyone else, I think you can have a racist. This might sound kind of weird saying it like this, but I think something can be said that is racist, but you're not a racist, right? So I don't know if all white people or some white people experience things that they feel is racist or they feel is discriminatory. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just asking, like, what do you think that you experienced growing up with what you went through?
I mean, if you break down definitions, I mean that's probably. I mean, I guess it's hard to say because I don't know their viewpoint. I mean, there's. I mean, I haven't met anybody, but I've heard that there's uh, groups of black individuals who feel like black people are the top people in the world,
Let me
and
let
so I
me let me
guess
say this. Yeah, let me
yeah,
say it like this because I think that there are people that are like that.
right, right,
Um, but it's not only the belief, but it's the act. Like white people cannot systemically be oppressed for being white, but any other person of color can be systemically oppressed in America because they're white.
right,
You
right.
know, I mean, because they're black or Hispanic or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Um, that's how I've always viewed race. Is the what our system has been placed as. I think that discrimination is across the board, whatever race, whatever gender, whatever. But racism can only be experienced by people of color because of the system that's been in place in America.
So your
Because
definition of racism is more of a systemic.
yeah, it's more of a
Okay.
systemic thing because it's not like it's not just the belief, but it's the action of it. Like
So only
Slavery, for example.
so racism in America can only be. I mean, something in other countries like
I don't really look at it from a worldview
Okay,
because
okay.
I've never gone
I
anywhere
got
but
you. I
like
got you.
outside of America, So I don't look at it um, from that perspective. I've only looked at it from what I've experienced here, because I can't really talk about outside of America, even though there's stuff that you can read on. And I've read on some stuff. I know, white people have been slaves and stuff like that in other countries, but when we're talking about America, for me, racism is a systemic thing that has been against people of color.
Gotcha.
So that's why I'm interested in knowing how you view it, because I never really talked in length or spoken in length with any with white people about that, like what racism means to them. And that's why I'm asking you that, because I want to know what racism means to you, what discrimination means to you.
I mean, for me, I feel like it's just a a certain negative feeling towards a person because of their physical appearance.
Hmm.
So, when white people hate all black people for whatever reason it is, it doesn't to me the reasoning doesn't even have to matter. It's
Yeah,
just when you feel a certain way about a whole group of people because of a whatever reason, like to me that's just I've always defined that as racist, and so not necessarily like um, whatever the economic term is, egocentric or whatever you feel like your group of people, because there's like another term for that too, where it's like I can't remember the term, and it's like a economic term or something where it's like you feel like your people is just superior, and that could be on a race level, country
are you
level,
talking about like class,
not
like
necessarily class,
upper
but it's
class,
like
middle class, lower class?
I don't know if it's egocentric. Uh, if somebody's got Google brought up, you might be able to look it up.
So,
It's either egocentric or something, but it's pretty much like you is it utilitarian?
Egotistical?
I can't remember. My teachers would stone me right now. But it's some type of like it's a long word, like something Itarianism or something.
Not like an ism, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember, but for me, whenever I think about the term racist, I just think this person hates this group of people. Like there's people who, like there's I've met white people who completely cool with black people hate anybody who looks Hispanic, or vice versa. They're cool with Hispanic people. They hate anybody who's black.
hmm
I've actually met black people who hate all white people. Um,
hmm
One thing I mean, honestly, like I talked to, I got a Mexican friend who I just became friends with. Talking to him, he said that a lot of Hispanic cultures are the biggest racist in existence because they hate each other with a passion. Like different groups, like Dominicans might hate. I can't remember what it was, Cubans or, but
hmm
like he was telling me, like
Dominicans hate Dominicans.
I,
How
I,
dark the
I,
light you
I
are.
can't remember. I can't remember what it is, but he was breaking that down. He was saying like if you look at like if you go in Mexico, there are certain groups of Hispanics that cannot cross certain areas because they will be beaten to death just based on their their race, I guess, or their I don't know.
Maybe their shade, their complexion
Yeah,
color.
exactly. Their shade, their height, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is very discriminated against in Mexico. And that's not something that common people would just know. Like, I didn't know that until he broke it down for me. It's not
Yeah,
something
see,
that
something like that I would describe as discrimination.
right, but I mean, I just think in general, like not to split hairs, but I just think if you hate a certain group of people because of something, you know, like if it's because of race, I would call that racism. If it's because they're a woman, I would call that discrimination. If it's because
Hmm.
a physical handicap, if it's whatever, I call it discrimination. If it's race, I would say racism. And but I just think in general,
Yeah.
like I think in general, if you haven't been into a deep study about it, I think I think the majority of America just views racism as hating a group of people because of their race. not necessarily feeling like you're better than them because of their race. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because to me, like I said earlier, to me, racism is not just one thing as far as perspective. It's also action.
right.
Like I said earlier, with the system in America and stuff like that. So that's interesting.
That's
That's
like,
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been told. I mean, I just think it's the way. There's so many different things. I'm trying not to share all the different crap that I've heard or experienced or witnessed or been told growing up. But like my granddad told me, he said never let. He said you can have black friends, just don't let them in their house because they'll think that they have automatic permission to sleep with your wife. And I was like, and thinking back at it, I'm like, but here's the thing though. Here's the thing. As a kid, like
Right.
my parents did have a black friend who tried to sleep with my mom,
Oh.
and so that fed into it.
Thanks.
To
Thanks.
me, to me,
You
that was,
said
you know what I'm
thanks.
saying.
You ruined it.
But like, here's the thing though, and I think for some white people, it's hard. Like when they experience that at a young age, it's
Uh-huh.
like anything else. It's like a language. Like
Yeah.
you learn
Yeah.
language at a young age, it's easier to learn that. So you learn these alternate truths,
Yeah. Yeah.
alternate facts or fake news, whatever. Like you learn that stuff at a young age, and as you grow up, if you hear women are bad drivers, you go
Mm-hmm.
driving down the road, you see somebody swerve, you might look at the car trying to verify that it's a woman. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah, definitely. What you hear growing up is what
that's
is
what I'm saying. And
more
so honestly,
interesting.
like I'm at a point now where I never look at the driver. I never look at a driver if it's a bad driver because
Really?
I don't want it to feed into any type of what I've been
Well,
told. I'm
well,
serious because
some, see something like that. Something like that is what I would define as prejudice because it's
okay,
prejudged. So like I think I think the bottom line is that we need to actually we need to come together and be more understanding of definitions because what I've noticed a lot on social media um, is that people just throw words out and they think it means this
People
when
are
they're
talking
really
past
talking
each
about
other.
this. So, huh?
It's going to be kind of ironic, but I said, and people are talking past each other, but I interrupted you to say.
Oh,
it's terrible.
no,
It's terrible.
but no, I think we have to have clear definitions on stuff like that because I think when someone over here is talking about racism when it's actually discrimination, or this person is talking about prejudice when this is actually like racism and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I agree with you.
We need to actually come to a clear understanding on what words are because words have meaning, and then when we define something as this when it's not that,
Yeah,
moving forward we're building on a crooked foundation.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
And I'll be
that
honest. I've had times where I feel like that doesn't matter.
mm-hmm,
Like for me, because I guess the way I think about it is like I think in a political discussion, if you're having debates or you're having like statistics, stuff like that, I think those things do matter. But I feel
mm-hmm,
like when you're talking about just issues in the church, you know, I think we had to break it down to, and I see what you're saying. Like, I understand, like, when you're talking about like a systematic thing
mm-hmm.
or a personal thing or in certain countries, one group of people from another based on looks. Like I understand, like when you're talking openly, you do need to know those definitions.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so I
yeah.
do understand that, and that honestly, probably until this discussion, I probably would have disagreed with what you said in knowing
Mm-hmm,
definitions because to me, it's like so many technicalities. People can get caught up on just the words that they never get into the discussion. But I can
hmm
understand that. Uh,
mm-hmm,
I mean, for me personally, like, the biggest thing that I wanted to share with people, and I've always felt this way, is I want to try to get as many different people's perspectives on
Right.
situations. Period. And like, and
Right.
one of the comments that somebody had said was like, if nobody cares to hear my opinion just because I'm a white male, and I don't feel like that's really. I mean, I don't know if that's the thing or not. Like, I don't know what individuals have experienced. I've never had somebody say, "I don't care what your thoughts and opinions are because you're a white male." Um,
Hmm.
I've never experienced that personally. I'm sure other people probably have.
Hmm.
You know, our country is full of different people. You know,
Hmm.
neighborhoods are different. Social social groups are different. On and social media communities are different, and so people have different experiences. And but me personally, I've never had somebody. I never felt like somebody didn't care about my opinion because I was a white male. Honestly, I felt opposite. I felt like because I'm a white male with a deep voice,
Hmm.
people like seriously. Like I heard from a Christian guy who is real big on science. You know, he was talking about. He said a white male with a deep voice has it just a little bit better in America than a pretty woman. Like
Interesting.
Gary
It's
Vaynerchuk said,
authoritative, kind of
yeah,
like an
but like, here, I
authoritative
mean,
norm.
yeah, like because you think like because of the deep voice,
Hmm.
like usually people will kind of fear. That's why like dads normally they could get the kids quicker with the deep voice because it's more threatening. And so
Hmm.
people will view something as more threatening, as more, okay, this is what I need to listen to because even though we don't think in our minds there's going to be a bad situation if I don't listen. But
So
it's
is that
just,
why we think when we portray God, God has a deep voice?
yeah, yeah, every time,
Interesting.
every time. Yeah. You always think of a deep voice because that's the voice you need to listen to because if you don't, something bad might happen.
Yeah, I would laugh at my dad if his voice was high pitched and he was trying to tell me what to do. I
That's
would
what,
have laughed at him. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? I mean, and that's that's
it
just
would have been funny.
that's 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 kind of a scientific, natural
I
way we
never thought
respond
of
to
something
things.
like that, man.
But but I mean, that's why you're never going to see a wrestler with a high pitched voice in pro wrestling.
Yeah, people just laugh at them
You're
unless
never
they're
going
a
to see it.
comedy.
Like, I mean, you're not going to see it, because it's not threatening. Like, you don't pay attention to
Yeah.
that, and that's and that's why a lot of people feel like we need to have a male leader of a country. Part of it is for that reason because other countries might not view a woman as a serious threat if they are trying to threaten us. Um,
Right.
and so that's been kind of just a side note there. But and I don't feel like we shouldn't have a woman president because of that whole. I mean, I don't feel that way. But
I was scared of my mom a lot.
but in
And I,
general, though, I'm really big on. I want to know other people's perspectives. That's why I love doing my podcast. Is because I
Mhm.
want to hear other people's experiences in business, and I've learned a
Right.
lot. I've interviewed several black women, and they've shared with me things that I didn't know was a thing
Hmm.
in our society still. I mean, the fact that a white man hands papers out to people and then slides it to her, whether because she's a woman or because she's black.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there was a
Oh, like hand it to their hand versus her. They don't go all the way to her. They just kind of just
yeah.
slide over.
A buddy of mine said like he didn't really understand racism was still around. He was in college, and a black friend of his they went up to go buy food, and the woman handed my white friend his change, and for the black guy she put it on the counter. Like things like that. Things that white people don't really pay attention to unless somebody tells you to pay attention to it.
Right.
But
Right.
and that's why for me perspective is big. I want to hear because I don't want to have the wrong perception of a situation. I want to have other people's perceptions, and
Right.
and you can't do that unless you listen. Like I don't
I agree.
I don't care to get my like I don't care if people hear my perception of things because to me that's just a selfish way of living life. Like everybody listen to me. Everybody listen to me unless somebody asks me. So But I guess those are my final words. If y'all want to share something final, so we probably need to wrap it up.
Uh,
Um,
uh,
I think this is good. I think where the church can have unity and discussion about these things productively, I think that's going to be good witness in this world, especially as because I don't think that things will naturally get better with or naturally have less tensions. We're probably gonna, if we don't, you know, treat it, probably gonna naturally have more racial tensions. But I think where we can actively work against that with understanding, you know, type of conversations like these, they can maybe make, you know, shape how we live, you know, differently. I think that'll be a good witness, especially white people listening to it should, I think, could take cues from you, Jason, how you're able to just admit things like, "Hey, this guy told me I don't rent to black people," or "Hey, my grandfather's kind of pretty racist, but here's how I'm processing it," instead of just shying away from it or you know, getting very most. I don't know what Derek gets, but sometimes with me in church, unfortunately, more in church than outside of church, I get more defensiveness when I've been in white situation, you know, with white people talking about race. But I think the not being defensive and learning and growing is going to be good. And for us, for those who are not white, being able to kind of present what we know and share our perspective boldly. Yeah.
yeah, I think bottom line, we need to actually listen to others, to each other, and understand where everyone's coming from. Like I said before, we need to have clear definitions on stuff when we're talking about something as serious as this. Um, and I think my biggest thing is I would like for white people to, like we said earlier, to just understand what their advantage is and use that advantage to help others because I think everybody should do that. You know, that's what helps everyone moving forward. You know. Um, Also, was that landlord Donald Trump's dad?
Nah, it's interesting though because if I share this on my Facebook, he's on my Facebook, so he might see it. And,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
lives right
leave
around
that.
the corner for me, and so. But
Yeah,
His business is going down the tube now.
well, no, because he won't rent to. I mean, he wasn't renting to black individuals before. I mean, so he's not going to lose any possible black tenants. I mean,
hey man, yeah,
but
you're not gonna lose
White
a
people
business
are
you never
like,
had.
hey, how about what about it's a practical step. Put him out. Put him out. What if
uh,
white people start running him too?
there was something that one of y'all said, and I want to. Oh, and being able to have conversation. Reason why I wanted to do this instead of like a Facebook group with just text, because writing in text is so you can't get a clear understanding of what a person's saying because of tone,
Oh,
because
yes,
it's much easier to get clarity back and forth real quick instantaneously rather than trying to type out a long, because eventually you get tired of typing and you're like, oh, screw it, I'm done with
not
it.
this type. I get tired of reading.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's much easier to have an actual
Yeah,
conversation, and
yeah.
thankfully we have technology where we can put this online for other people to see. And you know, as of right now, we've been open to having people from the official Trackstarz universe to chime in on these conversations. Hopefully,
Mhm.
we can have another one. I had a couple ideas. I think talking about the problem with how we're addressing millennials today and why millennials numbers are dropping in the church. I feel like
Right.
that'd be a really awesome conversation to have. Not necessarily controversial. I would also love to see talk about the what American Christianity looks like compared to other countries. Now, the problem with that is I would like for somebody from other countries who is a Christian to chime in,
Right.
And I know
Oh
of
yeah.
I know of one person, the guy from New Zealand, Stefan Speller. I'd love to get him on it, but um, anyway, so anybody out there, if you have any thoughts on great conversations we could have, that'd be awesome. If you want to participate, uh, hit us up in the official Trackstarz Universe Facebook group, and we will hopefully get another conversation scheduled. And Derek and David, I appreciate both of y'all doing this.
Sure.
And
I would love to get a KKK member in, talk with them.
man, if a KKK member
You
supports
sure?
the official Trackstarz Universe, that'd be
Love to do that.
that'd be incredible. That'd be incredible.
What? Here's my question, because I saw Roland Martin, the news journalist, interview Richard Spencer.
Yeah, that ain't
And
go
the
too.
only two interviews I think were good for Richard Spencer were Roland Martin and this black British journalist who cut the interview short because he didn't take basically Richard Spencer's ahistorical
Is
lies
it W.
basically.
Kamau Bell?
No, I thought his was bad because he was too nice to him. There was a British reporter who basically
I can see that.
was he didn't take because he didn't take any nonsense. And when Richard Spencer did all the lies, the type of things that Roland Martin proved, like Roland Martin asked him, "Well, who do you think built Egypt?" And then Richard Spencer insinuated like it wasn't like Africans. And so like all the things that the false history, basically extremely false history, the British reporter cut the interview short. And I think that's type of conversation, that's one aspect of the type of conversation that people need to have with people who are just that far off in terms of not knowing facts.
Right. And I'll
And
be
I'm
honest.
interested to see what you would say to the KKK
I
person.
wouldn't cut him off, man. I would actually like to sit down and learn your perspective.
I would. I'll be honest. Like, I have no idea who y'all are talking about right now at all. None of these people.
Spencer, he's
Richard Spencer is he's one of the alt-right leaders.
Okay.
the guy with the Hitler-looking haircut.
See, I don't pay attention to Fox News, so I don't know who that is. But
I don't know what news he's on.
Yeah,
But-
One that got
it's
punched
better
back.
you don't know him.
I'll do one more thing.
Well.
One more thing I did want to add before we cut is that I know Derek and I don't see eye to eye on politics specifically, or at least because you were a huge Bernie Sanders fan. I was not.
You know one reason why?
I mean,
He
this
was the
probably.
best. He was the best one that was available.
But either way, I mean, and I just want to say that we don't all. I mean, I don't know. This is the first time actually really talking to David, so I don't know really your thoughts or anything. But I do know that I'm pretty sure we don't all agree 100% on everything. And,
Oh yeah, I don't agree with my girlfriend on a lot of things, so I guarantee we don't agree on some stuff.
But so this isn't like three identically like-minded people talking about one thing and having the same viewpoint. I think we've all seen that. I think all of us maybe have viewed something different for the first time. So, and that's exactly why I like doing this. So we can all learn something different. But but I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. Maybe next time we'll have some ladies join us. Some because that was something else I felt was lacking. We didn't have any women in the conversation, and so coming to gender, the gender privilege thing, we had lack
Use
of
that privilege and get some women in here.
You get your girlfriend on the line, man. She can help.
Oh shit, no, you don't want it.
Alright, well guys,
or outside of black and white too, like just outside of black and white as well.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get another one of these done soon. But until then, we did, Derek. We had kind of tossed around the idea for the title of this thing.
What did we say? What, real talk or something like that?
Yeah, you suggested real talk. So anybody got any good ideas? Let us know. So anyway,
isn't there a show two guys and a girl, two black people and a white guy? No, maybe not.
Well, that won't always be the scenario
though. These types of segments, you mean?
Yeah.
Not this episode. Okay.
Yeah, not specific. Like, because I'd like to have these conversations later with other topics. So
yeah.
Is it Trackstarz thing or is your podcast thing or?
I mean, it's kind of Trackstarz. because I mean we're opening it to the official Trackstarz universe. So this
Mhm.
isn't my this isn't for my podcast.
Okay.
So, but y'all, well I appreciate it. Y'all have a
Sir.
great new year, and
You too, man.
and
You too.
we will have this up hopefully on YouTube soon. So,
Oh yeah.
go
All
ahead.
right.
All right. Catch y'all later.